Hi everyone, welcome to It's Not Magic, SEO for Developers. I'm Michael Richardson and I'll be your guide on our journey today. So let's plan a bit for our journey. We're going to talk about a bunch of things today and we're going to break it up into a few different topics. We're going to talk about a little bit about SEO in general at the beginning. We're going to talk about how pages are indexed and placed into search engines. We're going to talk a little bit about how pages are displayed on the search engine results page, ranking factors, and we're also going to talk about monitoring your performance of your site on search engines. So the first question, of course, is what is SEO? Now, SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. If you're not familiar with it, we can cue the Wikipedia quote. Search engine optimization is the process of growing the quality and quantity of website traffic by increasing the visibility of a website or a web page to users of a web search engine. So essentially, SEO can bring more users to your site. But who cares? Well, if the sites that you're building are for internal use or are strictly behind a login, then you don't actually care at all. Search engines will never see your pages, they'll be unable to index them, and any SEO efforts are pretty much pointless. On the other hand, if you're building an e-commerce or promotional site, or really any public site at all, you're in a very different position. In that case, SEO can be extremely valuable. SEO can bring much more traffic to your site, which means SEO can bring more money to your business. Traffic from a search engine is essentially free. You're not paying per click or relying on other advertisements to attract customers. That means that SEO has the power to transform your business. For some companies, SEO can make the difference between success and failure. You're probably familiar with some search engines like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and there are a variety of others. But Google is dominant in the US and many other countries. I mostly have familiarity with SEO in the US. And with about 90% of the market share, Google is so dominant that most SEO efforts primarily focus on optimizing results in Google. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about how your sites find their way into search engines. When learning about SEO, it's important to understand a little bit about how search engines work. Now, I'm going to start by taking you through the search engine indexing lifecycle. This process is accomplished by a variety of specialized programs, and we often refer to these programs as bots or crawlers. This is the crawler process. Each of these steps is executed by a different bot, and in between them are queues for the next bot to pull from. So first, we're going to talk about how search engines find your pages. That's primarily going to be through links from other pages and from sitemaps, though some of them do come from other unknown sources, perhaps typing an address into a URL bar. So once those pages are found, they go into a render queue. And the first pass with the render bot is simply a server rendered page. It's going to request the page from the server, and whatever comes back is the result. It will not run any of the JavaScript that you have on the page. So if you have a fully client rendered site, the search engine might not get much from that. After that, the page will be placed in a queue for a second pass that may occur several days to even weeks later. And on that pass, it'll be executed with JavaScript. So that's where a client rendered site will be rendered more effectively. So what this means is that server rendered pages are going to give you better SEO as a rule. They're going to be crawled more quickly and reliably. Finally, indexing. The part where they're actually placed into the search engine. And the indexing algorithm is the secret sauce. Search engines are notoriously cagey about how their indexing algorithms work. They'll provide some details, but much of what we would like to know is veiled in secrecy. And that means that the SEO industry hangs on the words of people who have some insight into the process. So check out this recent tweet. John Mew is a webmaster trends analyst at Google. So he is an authoritative source on such things. SEO specialists accumulate little details like this one in the tweet to make informed decisions about SEO strategy. Now that we've learned a little bit about crawlers, we're going to talk about some of the special pages that they interact with. The first one is robots.txt. Now, this page is essentially just a list of pages that the crawler is not allowed to access. You'll see here, this is the robots.txt for Twitter, and they're essentially saying that crawlers may not access any of their pages. A little odd, but I guess it works for them. Google, as you can see here, has a rather extensive robots.txt. An important note to make: adding pages to your robots.txt is easy to do, but it's also a heavy-handed way to keep crawlers from indexing parts of your site. The crawler literally won't access those pages at all. Even adding pages to the robots.txt won't even de-index pages that are already indexed. For that, you'll use a meta robots tag instead, that we'll talk about later. The other important job of robots.txt is to make crawlers aware of your sitemap. As you can see from the bottom of this one, you can see it gives the link to the kruger.com/sitemap.xml. So sitemaps help search engines find pages on your site. They're kind of the other side to a robots.txt where they're specifically blocking. They're essentially just a list of URLs in XML. It's like handing search engines a wish list of pages that you want them to index. So they're easy to create once you put together your list of URLs. This is an example right here. It's pretty straightforward XML. You could probably find a library in your preferred language that will create it for you. Something to know is that large sites really do need sitemaps, but they're far less important for small, easily crawlable sites. Those kind of sites, the small ones, they're just not that hard for search engines to index. But when you have 10,000 product pages, it's much less likely that Google will find them all if you don't actually provide a sitemap listing all of them. So now that we've talked a bit about the crawling process, we need to get acquainted with how search engines actually display search results. A SERP is a search engine results page. This is just another acronym that SEO specialists tend to use. And this is an example of a search engine results page. You see the various parts of it there. You got some links and stuff. Often the first thing that you'll see on a SERP is ads. And this is how search engines make money: by selling companies the right to priority placement above other results. Now, ads are not strictly considered part of SEO. They're more part of search engine marketing, SEM, but they are important to be aware of when you're creating an SEO strategy. Below the ads, if there are any, you'll see the organic results. Organic results refers to non-ad links on the SERP, results that you don't have to pay for. Of course, the top spot in the SERP is the most coveted position. It's estimated that searchers click the first result about 25% of the time. Now you can imagine, if you can secure the top spot for a bunch of high volume queries, that's a lot of clicks and a lot of traffic. There are other components to the SERP in certain circumstances. For instance, if a search has local intent, the search engine may show a local map pack. And this can be really important for companies that have brick and mortar locations. In that case, you can use something like Google My Business to keep those listings up to date. Definitely an important element to think about if that's a part of your business. You may also see a featured snippet, and this helps bring more attention to your page by putting some of the content directly into the SERP. And finally, we have the second page. There's an old SEO joke. Where's the best place to hide a dead body? That's the second page of Google search results because nobody ever looks there. Yeah, and that says 1 billion results. The vast majority of those are unseen and unclicked. For SEO, you want to make sure that your pages rank as high as possible on that very first page. So now we know that we want our pages to rank as highly as possible. We don't want them to be relegated to the dregs of Google. But how do we make that happen? Now, like I mentioned before, we don't know all the details about search engine ranking algorithms, but there is a lot that we do know. Search engines want to make users happy, so they keep using that search engine. If Google doesn't give results that match what you're looking for, eventually you will start using a different search engine that does give you what you want. Here are a few ways to make sure that your site is providing those kind of results. Essentially, page content, links to the page, domain authority, and performance. First one's page content. Relevant, useful page content is the most important ranking factor. Search engines want to provide the best answer to a user's query. If a page provides useful content that matches what users are looking for, that's a great ranking signal. The second one is links to the page. This is also known as link equity. If there are lots of other pages that link to a page, it's a good signal that searchers will find it valuable. And links from popular sites like CNN are worth more than a link from your brother's blog. Now, once you build this up, this link equity, you don't want to lose it. So keeping URLs consistent over time is important. Third one is domain authority. Pages on respected, well-known sites are going to naturally rank higher than pages on unknown domains, all other things being equal. And this is one reason why it can be really valuable to become an authority in a certain space. That having all that content under one domain brings it ranking value. Also, performance. Users prefer pages that load quickly and smoothly. Search engines know this, and they prioritize fast pages accordingly. Google has lots of utilities that you can use to test your site's performance. They even offer suggestions for improvement. Know that your pages will be measured on several different metrics. Google lays this out as core web vitals. It's something you can research a little bit more. Now we can finally get to the real meat of SEO, the page content. The indexing algorithm is trying to figure out what this page is about and when it will be useful to users. You want to make sure that your page makes this very clear to the user and to the search engine. If your site provides the best answer to the searcher's question, it's hard to lose. Let's break things down and talk about the most critical components of the page. We're going to look at the URL, the meta details, and the body components. The URL is an often overlooked component of both SEO and user experience. I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple examples of ways that you can optimize your page URLs. If a user sees this URL, then they probably have no idea what product it represents, unless they have a hobby of memorizing UPCs. On the other hand, this one is about the same length, and it tells me what I need to know about the page. Namely, that it's for a banana. Now we can compare these URLs right next to each other. Which one is more useful to you? So make sure that your URLs are useful and descriptive while not being overly long. You also want to watch out for special characters like spaces, because they tend to make URLs ugly and messy. Instead of converting those special characters, what you want to do is convert those sentences and spaces into slugs, using hyphens as dividers. That just creates a more readable and indexable URL. Let's talk a little bit about the meta details that you can put in your page. The title is the first one. The title is important for both user experience and ranking criteria. It gives the search engine an indication of what the page is about. It also appears in the SERP, occasionally modified. Of course, this means the title can have an impact on both ranking and click-through rate, which can be extremely important. It doesn't matter if you get lots of views of your link if nobody's clicking on it. The description works with the title to set the topic of the page. You can see here the meta tag that sets the description, and you can see it in the SERP there. It's often featured in the SERP, but it doesn't show on the page. So it's easier to forget about. Let's talk a little about the body components that you'll want to consider. The header elements, like H1 and H2, should clearly identify the content of the page. The body text should be useful to the user. Remember, user value through relevance is the most critical ranking factor. Image alt tags are vital for accessibility and also for search engines. You need to remember that the bot doesn't experience the page in the same way that a sighted human does. Breadcrumbs also provide hierarchical links to other pages, adding link equity, and also help to define the structure of the site. They also provide links to other pages in the site. Structured data is a method of providing important details to search engines in a well-known format that they know how to process. Here's an example. This one is structured data for a product. You can see how it's enabling a special treatment in the SERP, like you see here, where it's showing the price of the banana and that it's in stock. You can also implement this structured data for recipes, businesses, people, and all kinds of other data types. Breadcrumbs are an important one, and they'll actually show up a little bit different. Your page will actually show up a little bit different in the SERP if you have breadcrumb schema. You can actually see that in this one as well, where it says fresh fruit. So the details about schema are at schema.org. I'm not going to regurgitate all of them here. They're mostly useful when you need them, and you can, it's best to just go there to look it up. There's various ways to implement structured data, but JSON-LD is the easiest one, and it is the one you should go for. You can, once you have implemented structured data on your page, you can actually test it in Google's structured data testing tool. Let's also talk a little bit about social sharing enhancements. These aren't specifically SEO, but they are important, and they're usually tackled at the same time as SEO improvements. So here you can see some content and the Twitter card that it creates. This is all the content that you need to render a nice card when someone shares a link to your page. Social sites use a standard called the Open Graph Protocol. Details are pretty easy to find. Depending on what you want to display, you simply provide the proper meta tags. Here you can see with this one, we're providing a title, an image, and a description. We're also telling Twitter that we want the kind of card we want to display is a summary. Now, important note about social sharing. In order to activate these kind of cards, your page must be server-side rendered. In my experience, social media bots won't run your JavaScript. So a client-side rendered page will simply, these enhancements won't appear if your page is client-side rendered. Now we can talk a little bit about some of the elements on your page that you can use to manage the way that search engines index your page. Canonical URLs help to resolve a very specific problem. So take a look at all of these URLs, and they all resolve to the same page. But search engines don't know this for certain when they crawl them. Now we want to make sure that search engines realize this and direct users to the preferred page. So by putting this canonical tag with the what we do is we put this canonical tag with the preferred URL on each of those pages. This gives search engines the hint that all these pages are really the same, and this is the URL that you want indexed. The MetaRobots tag allows you to give search engines instructions on how to index a specific page. For instance, you may have a page that you don't want search engines to index at all. Perhaps it's just not a very useful search result, not a useful result in the search engine, or it's only available to a certain set of customers and you don't want people discovering it through a search engine. Adding this MetaRobots tag that you see here instructs crawlers to not index the page, but continue following links from this page to other pages. So it allows it to continue passing that link equity. This is the preferred way to keep pages out of the search engine index. You can also instruct crawlers in this way to index a page, but not follow the links on it. So, how do you know that your SEO is working and that the enhancements that you've made, the changes that you've made, are taking effect as you desire? Well, one of the best ways to do that is by using Google Search Console. This is Google Search Console for the Momentum Developer Conference website. And from here, I can access a variety of information. I can see the number of times that people have seen pages from the website in the search results, the number of times they've clicked on them, the number of pages that are indexed, which ones are valid and which ones are errors. I can look at the various sitemaps that Google is aware of, and I can also take action to remove certain pages if necessary. There's also a tab where I can look at the performance of my pages and how Google views those. So this one, for example, shows the number of indexed pages from the Momentum website. You can see there's 80, there's 96 of them that are excluded, but usually there's a good reason for that. And this here, you can see the performance over the past 16 months. That's as far back as Search Console goes. But you can kind of see how closer to the conference, more people search for it. And as we get farther away, it becomes less relevant. There's a lot of different ways to slice the data in Search Console. For instance, in the one before, you can actually see the different queries that bring up that it appears for. In this here, you can see the number of times Momentum's website appeared in the results for queries containing the word Cincinnati. Looks like about 3,000 times, but only had about 8 total clicks. So, take that as you may. You can even inspect specific pages to understand how they're being indexed. So if you're having a problem with a specific page and it's not getting the traffic that you expect, you can go in here and see how Google sees it, and that might give you some insight into how you can improve your ranking. When working on SEO, you want to continually monitor your site's performance to watch for unexpected changes. Search engines can change their algorithms at any time to the potential benefit or detriment of your site. You may also introduce regressions or improvements that cause your pages to gain or lose ground in the rankings. If you detect problems early, they are typically much easier to solve. So just keep an eye on your performance of your pages. Also realize that sometimes you just have to be patient. Some changes that you make may take weeks or months to have an SEO impact. Especially when launches new pages, it may take a seriously long time for search engines to ramp up traffic to those new pages. So let's do a quick recap. When you're working on SEO, relevance is king. You have to provide the user with what they want. You want to test and monitor different things as you are implementing SEO improvements. You want to explore your tools as needed. I'm giving you a lot of tools today that you can use, and you may not think of needs for them at a time right now, but you may encounter a scenario one day where you need one of them. And then you also want to keep SEO in mind as you build the site out, especially with such things as URLs and performance. Those are things you always want to keep in the back of your mind because those can be harder to change down the road. Thank you very much, and appreciate you watching my talk today. Thank you.